Ladies and gentlemen, it is a distinct honor and a privilege for me to have the chance to introduce to you our next speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Igor Munteanu. Ambassador Munteanu is a political analyst and a journalist, having served as Moldova's ambassador to the United States since August 2010, as well as Moldova's ambassador to Canada since February 2011. He began his career with the government in 1992, serving as an advisor to the office of the President of Moldova. In 1993, he helped found one of Moldova's first think tanks, the Institute for Development and Social Initiatives. 3 years later, he became executive director of the IDIS, that institute, Viitorul, and served in this capacity until 2010. From 1994 until 1996, Ambassador Munteanu was assistant to the director of the International Foundation for Electoral Systems. And from 1997 until 2005, he provided political commentary for Radio Free Europe. He was later a lecturer at the Academy for Economic Studies from 2007 until 2010. Ambassador Munteanu has been a member of the advisory board of the Balkan Trust for Democracy and the Black Sea Trust for Regional Cooperation, as well as a member since 2008 of the International Board of PASOS, the policy associations affiliated to the Open Society, based in Prague, as well as the Institutional Committee of the Congress of Local and Regional Authorities of the Council of Europe. He has also been a board member of the Moldova Foundation, a non-governmental organization based in Washington, D.C., focused on advocacy matters for Moldova and seeking to build long-lasting ties between the West and Moldova. The lecture topic that he's chosen today is Moldova, Soft Power in Transitional Democracies. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a very, very warm welcome for His Excellency, Ambassador Igor Munteanu. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this chance to speak to you. And it's my first time when I'm invited to speak at this kind of regular forums. And of course, you have today a long day when you have already listened to different presentations and the countries from diplomats, from different categories of the experts. I decided, considering the topic I have to choose for today's presentation, I've decided to select one of the topics that is usually seen as a kind of common avenue between the political scientists and the decision makers. And this is, of course, the soft power, which is a buzzword in many areas. And of course, this the soft power, I'm trying to transfer the soft power concept over the realities that take place in the southeastern Europe, the region to which my country belongs. Southeastern Europe, which is a little bit undistinguished from the map, is really a region that that pass transformation, and this transformation is related to the gravitation towards the European Union, and the European Union is presenting several ways to integrate the countries at its peripheries. I'm going to speak about the soft power as an important element of the policies that target our countries, our region, and also how the impact of these policies resonate over the internal developments of these countries. Moldova is, just to start with a short presentation of the country, because this is very important to every long speech. I hope this will not be too long. Moldova is a small country of about 4 million of inhabitants. Generally, my country, Moldova, belonged in the last or before 1991 to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union dissipated, disintegrated, and the country, like its neighbors, started a quick transition, the transition to the market economy, to the rule of law, to the constitutional democracy, to the democratical process that has usually a lot of merits and a lot of challenges. And this transition is described in several areas of economical analysis, social analysis. What is exactly important for my presentation, my today's presentation, is how the large powers like the European Union define a policy towards its peripheries. And this is one of the most astonishing experiences in the last, let's say, 15 years, when the European Union started to think over a policy of integration of the new countries that, which laid at its periphery. I will start, however, with some terminological definitions, which are very important to any academical and discussion. Of course, the core concept is the soft power, which has so many interpretations. Sometimes it has also abusive interpretation. I will start by saying that although this is a new concept, it denotes, it is also old as the human history. I will say that Lao Tzu comments that a leader is best not when people obey his commands, but when they barely know he exists. This is a very famous definition, but it was echoed afterwards by, of course, Machiavelli, who says that the prince should be better feared than loved, but the worst thing is when it is hated. Both statements call upon careful use of power and imply that the nature of power defines the outcomes of any encounter. Our world is really changing rapidly, and the buzzword is not if, but how to better use our relative power in order to achieve what we must. Joseph Nye rightly observes in his book, The Future of Power, the intermarriage between the three dimensions of power. Military power, where the United States is clearly continues to be largely a dominant global power. Economic power, reflecting a multipolar world, where the United States, Europe, Japan, and China are the major trade suppliers of the global economy. And the third one is the realms of the public opinion, a kind of boiling pot with non-state actors, think tanks, bankers, charities, and academia, civic and religious leaders becoming more and more influential in an already existing non-polar world. States are strong when they can exercise all powers to reap the outcomes they want. Some goals that states seek in global politics are more susceptible to the second and third than to the first phase of power. The wisdom to choose among these powers speak about the vision and leadership. No one can neglect the outstanding role of the military force in the current international affairs, which is which is equated to the first phase of power, known also as the command power. This kind of power is more visible and readily to grasp, since it may get desired outcomes through coercion and rewards. But when co-opting is possible, policymakers can save on carrots and sticks, of course. The co-optive power of phases 2 and 3 is more subtle and therefore less visible, thus being more associated with the power, with the soft power, which is the ability to get preferred outcomes through the co-optive means, like agenda setting, persuasion, and attraction. The soft power is equally called the power of the positive choice. Soft power is not therefore a form of idealistic representation or of wishful thinking. It is simply a specific sort of accessible power, one way of getting desired outcomes as an alternative to raw power politics, which usually inflicts a sort of aggression against the object of power projection. Now, allow me to reproduce the theoretical framework into practical realities of my region, of the Southeastern Europe, a region to which I know a little bit more than about other regions. After rejecting the Soviet legacy, Southeastern Europe, West Balkans, but also part of the European hemisphere of the former Soviet Union, decided to move closer to the European Union. Despite myriads of obstacles, legacies, and active discouragements, most of these countries claimed a return to Europe project that was somehow naive, idealistic, but nevertheless genuine and right. Seen as the shining city and the hill, European Union has created a strong attraction to the nations in the ex-socialist Soviet bloc, who expressed their desire to join it, irrespective to the costs of this collective effort and the enormous tasks ahead. When most of the West Balkan countries, successors of the Yugoslav state, signed a stabilization and association agreement with the European Union by the end of 2000, other Southeastern European states, like Moldova and Ukraine, remained somehow outside of the process of integration. The European Union was too preoccupied to end the absurd war in the former Yugoslavia and provide an exit strategy to those that could overcome their grievances. But this has created indirect discrimination towards other states, which by accident belonged to another region, ex-Soviet space, despite a similar statehood provided initially to Moldova. Initially, by 2000, Moldova was a part of the Stability Pact and also part of the Southeastern European Initiative. In 2008, European Union decided to correct its past hesitations or mistakes and launched the Eastern Partnership Policy as a geographical extension of the European Neighborhood Policy. The Neighborhood Policy was created by the European Union with the stated goal to avoid new dividing lines between the European Union, enlarged and prosperous, and its immediate neighbors, still fragile and poor. It promised access to all 4 freedoms of the European Union, which means services, freedom of services, capitals, goods, and visa, circulation of citizens, but leaving outside the issue of accession. In geographical terms, the European Neighborhood Policy addressed both eastern and southern frontiers of the European Union, curtailing therefore the sensitivity shown by some of its members towards the Mediterranean neighbors, France and Spain, mainly populated by nations that do not aspire for European Union membership. And Eastern Partnership, which states that vocally and demand a full-fledged integration into the European Union. The political commitment of the European Union is to assist their transformation and enhance its rewards on the basis of individual merits. And this creates an enormous leverage of soft power in Europe, which I'm going to address today. European neighborhood policy is perceived in many countries of Europe as an alternative to the accession process. But nobody will make out of this negation a fight in the name of their national interest, since Article 49 of the Lisbon Treaty says clearly that every country can be eligible for the European Union if it is able to achieve Copenhagen Criteria. And second, strong opposition to any enlargement may create deep divides inside of the political European Union, particularly with those states that show political commitment and stewardship for the aspiration of the neighbors of the European Union, like Sweden, Poland, Romania, and Baltic states. But moving closer to the European Union is conditional. While the European Union is setting up necessary conditions under which certain states may receive access to the European Union inner circles like communities, spaces, policies, and of course funds, these states are usually calculating the costs and benefits of the reform before the start implementation. Every step towards approximation of the European Union laws turns into an exercise of cost-benefit calculation by the targeted state. In the early 1990s, the European Union shaped its main ideas about the criteria to be met by the prospective countries for accession, and these are known today as Copenhagen Criteria. Negotiations take place at every field and at every step in every field that is of interest to the sides or make up a part of the European Union common space, access to the common market, energy, intellectual property, competition, public acquisitions, transparency, sustainable development, trade, protection, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, rules of origin, customs administration. The European Commission, as an executive body of the European Union, sets up the targets of normative adjustments, make periodical assessments of the implementation regulations, and practices assessing the level of accomplished approximation. This is how the soft power of the European Union work, in fact. The acceptance of the normative policies set by the European Union towards candidates to accession, as well as to the neighbors showing accession ambitions like Moldova, Ukraine, etc., other countries, enables all national governments to focus on specific or practical fields: border management, market integration, energy, aviation, education, but also judiciary, while the European Union can instead gain additional leverage in setting up the agenda of domestic reforms. As a result, the general rule is that the positive impact of the European Union and democracy in outsider states increases with the size and credibility of the European Union conditional incentives. In other words, the larger and more credible the reward, the more likely is that the state will comply to the established conditions. Since Moldova wants to become a candidate state to the European Union membership, it tries to adjust its national legislation and practices to the European Union basic legal rights and obligations, accepting benevolently to approximate, which means incorporate into the national legislation an enormous amount of rules and standards, known also as acquis communautaire. The European soft power is defined by four main toolbox or instruments. The first one is the conditionality, which I have already mentioned. And the conditionality is defined as a way to adapt to the institutional rules already existing in the European Union. The second one is socialization. That means the policy to keep the population charmed by the idea of unified Europe. The third one is the Europeanization, which means the impact of the adaptation to the European rules and governance. And finally, the last one is the externalization. The externalization means a transfer of sovereign attributions to the pan-European bodies and authorities, including important areas of competence like currency, foreign service, standardization of specific technical fields. I would like to continue by saying that the conditionality is accepted, therefore, not as a cost, but as an investment in much closer integration with the European Union. Something that was a powerful incentive in moving Central Europeans towards full membership in the last decade. Croatia being the last lucky winner, or the latest lucky winner of the accession. Also, the accession is largely an elite-driven process of negotiations, very technical, sometimes very painful, often obscure to the ordinary citizens. However, the process is generally valued as a benign project by ordinary citizens. As a result, few politicians will ignore the enthusiastic support of the public in Moldova towards the European Union, for instance, if they want to be re-elected. Pressed by tough deadlines, ministries and various regulatory agencies, energy, aviation, competition, have to be able to deal their tasks through an extremely complicated negotiation with the teams coming from the European Union. Under tight schedule and the enormous pressures from mass media, the government in Moldova, for instance, is under constant scrutiny from a hyperactive civil society and very well informed mass media and sensitive issues like trade, visa-free infrastructure, but also in decentralization of power or transparent use of European funds. Also, tough European Union is able to impose conditions that can be met, which is reciprocated in much desired trade preferences, additional funding for critical health care reforms, enhanced political dialogue, or other benefits like financing for research, education, or energy efficiency projects. This is the logic of the rapid accession of our close neighbors, Central European and the Baltic states. Nothing is sure by default with respect to the rapid accession, since the formal invitation to join the European Union for the candidate state is to be accepted only when all members of the European Union agree. This means a kind of consensual policy inside of the European Union. Therefore, aspiring states, Moldova is one of the aspiring states, must be able to respond with a huge amount of soft power on their behalf. Therefore, conditionality of the European Union depends also on the willingness and capabilities of the local elites. If authorities are not willing to implement what was agreed with the European Union bodies, they will fail to introduce the legal approximation into the national legislation. And accordingly, they will also fail to convince the European Commission as an executive body of the European Union to continue its assistance in the key areas of adjustments. The story will be like in a very old Soviet joke. We pretend to work hard and they pretend to pay us a lot. Some of these rules sound really strange, but nevertheless the European Union policy is very clear. When Moldova will look like us, then the political integration will be imminent. The European Union and NATO were seen from the very beginning of transition as twin organizations, providing both the elements for security and development, although their appeal sounds different in different contexts. But selection criteria for European Union were strikingly different to those of NATO during the Cold War. At the time of the NATO creation, states had to establish a system of defense against the USSR, the Soviet Union, and be able to militarily defy the Soviet threat. In the case of the European Union, states need to adjust to the political administration and economic structures of the European Union in order to be able to join, demanding considerable efforts in exchange for membership of European Union. One needs to be very clear. Membership to the European Union is proved to be the best instrument for inducing states to accept the most impossible conditions for accession due to the size of reward and its credibility. Confidence in the benignity of the European Union integration has skyrocketed in all polls surveys in the last 2 decades of transition. Confidence, this was mostly driven by individual or the interests of individuals as ordinary citizens to be part of the prosperous and secure Europe, but also by a strong symbolical affiliation with Europe, based on cultural links, languages, charm of the West that is so deeply associated with the European Union. More than 62% of the population in Moldova, for instance, believe that our country should be part of the European Union. Still, 40% of the population wish to keep good relations with Russia and other former Soviet states. Positive image of the individual European Union members clearly dominate individual preferences. They are Germany, France, but also Poland and Romania, which clearly suggests that it would not be a big deal to convince some of the European Union members to be champions for Moldova in this march towards the membership. Nevertheless, a state to which European Union conditionality is applied is expected to change its behavior in order to avoid punishment for non-compliance. It is clear that the state receives some rewards if it does conform, while in the case that it does not, the European Union may pursue the following options: may withhold the reward, which is called reactive reinforcement, or inflicts punishment, which is called coercive reinforcement, or finally provide support, which is called supportive reinforcement. Usually, European Union does not punish the non-compliant states if commitments are broken, but withholds the reward as to induce the urgency of requests. Thanks to this, European policy of conditionality is often perceived as a positive conditionality. In most of the cases, states tend to conform to their commitments. Only in the case of Belarus, recently, European Union has applied travel restraints on state leaders, withdrawn access to GSP, and also applied some restrictive measures that can be categorized as coercive reinforcement. European Union is interested to assist systemic changes in the political, economic, and social structures of its neighbors, creating singular corridors only for those who are able to perform. As some European Union officials tell that in public, the European Union is ready to give more for more in terms of institutional integration and finances. And this is reflected generally in the allocated resources for anchoring the targeted states, Moldova, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, to the European common spaces, transport, foreign policy, energy, airfare, education. For instance, Moldova has received the largest financial support from the European Union as estimated per capita bonus between 2009 and 2012. Today, over 55% of our exports go to the European market, compared to the previous decade when Moldovan economy was 90% dependent on the Russian market. This shows clearly the impact of the European Union, not only in the political terms, in setting up the institutions necessary for development, but also in the orientation of the goods, services, and main exports. So conditionality creates the obligation for a democratic governance to respond swiftly to the structural fragilities, such as to curb corruption, to reform the judiciary, and reform the law enforcement bodies, protect diversity, and enable wide participation of the public in the political process. What seems to be almost an impossible mission, build public support while running structural reforms, is still a must that need leadership. Also, coalition-based governments are more difficult to manage, and Moldova has a three-party coalition government today. Soft power means also to accept stewardship from the partner states to create or build up new administrative capabilities in the custom area, security sector reform, both at the national as well as the regional level. Pre-accession instruments highlights the involvement and active role of the European Union as an authoritative external actor. But for countries without membership perspective, conditionality is highly different in both character and consistency. So Moldova is negotiating today an association agreement, which is based largely on two pillars: visa-free regime and DCFTA, which is free trade agreement with the European Union. Of course, the association agreement is seen as a milestone in our claim, in our desire to be a full-fledged member of the European Union. Today, the Eastern Partnership does not promise a membership perspective to Moldova, but also does not preclude it. In January 2012, European Union Commissioner Cecile Malmström, which is responsible for Home Affairs, officially invited Moldova to launch negotiations on visa, while in March 2012, European Commissioner and Trade de Gucht invited Moldova to official negotiations on DCFTA. On 15th of June this month, Moldovan negotiators concluded the 11th round of negotiations in the association agreement and enter into the second final phase. Meanwhile, Moldova is already an active member in several communities or spaces of the European Union, like the Energy Union, like the common aerospace, and also Moldova associates itself to the foreign policy of the European Union. Moldova is an object of soft power policy of the European Union, as I tried to mention, but it is also a subject of soft power. Soft power means good to excellent relations with neighboring countries, Romania and Ukraine. It means also an intensive and credible diplomatic campaign with all 28 members of the European Union, who are supposed to acknowledge Moldova's desire to be part of the European Union. A group of friends of 17 ministers of foreign affairs of the European Union state members has been created already in 2010, but work is huge ahead. Public awareness campaign inside Moldova and targeted film, art festivals, country presentations, forums became regular events that Moldova state is learning to project in European countries. Since Romania is already an European Union member, it is well entitled to advocate for Moldovan interest in the European Union, while Ukraine is a natural ally and partner along the way of negotiating a future accession to the European Union. It is obvious that cultural heritage is much stronger with Romania due to the identity of languages, history, and culture, while with Ukraine, Moldova share a kind of teamwork spirit and a sense of common good goal to be achieved in regard to the European Union. Soft power means social integration of national minorities, state financing of education in the national languages, subsidies from the state to the preservation of ethnocultural traditions. Moldova is also trying to replicate what we learned from the European Union and the way to reintegrate territorially one of the breakaway regions of Moldova, Transnistria, which split apart in 1992. This is done through a sophisticated set of instruments combining socialization, confidence building, public diplomacy, but also via specific incentives to business community of the region and infrastructure projects. In conclusion, and of course I will allow questions to respond afterwards, I wanted to say that soft power in the realms of the European Union has an influential role and a reputation to the countries in accession and to the countries that already passed the barriers. European Union exercised the soft power in order to anchor and integrate countries that are ready to this journey towards democracy and prosperity. Such efforts are based on the democratic peace theory, which suggests that since democratic states do not go to war against each other, then spreading democracy means promoting a peaceful international environment. I hope I have provided you at least some of the elements to compare your countries and my country, and I will be very glad to respond to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We very much appreciated that. We would welcome your questions or comments. Who would like to go first? Ambassador of Moldova. Yeah, okay, here.
My name is Zeke, founder, Polyglot in Action for Diversity. 2 days ago, I made a statement about soft power, and it was strongly disagreed with, which was okay. And as I listened to you, without saying what I said about soft power, I do believe that what I said makes sense and get some confirmation in what you said. In other words, you said something like the European Union uses soft power, blah, 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 toward new countries that are trying to join the Union. Basically, European Union is like the elephant, the big boy, the big lady in the room, trying to get the young girls. And in other words, the powerful trying to get the less powerful to join. And that's tend to be my understanding of soft power, even though that understanding does not say all about this phenomenon. And I was wanting to see what you think about that. Soft power as instrument basically devised by the big one, big people, the powerful, toward less powerful.
Thank you very much. Well, I cannot judge on what kind of disagreements you had with the concept. What I can say is that soft power is just an instrument. The instrument commensurate or relate means to resources. European Union is very interested to use to a larger extent the soft power because it has more experience in using it. First. Second, it is a community of countries that do not, let's say, have other ways to integrate or reintegrate the continent under a political union, unless it will conform to the realities in the ground which have to be changed in the countries at the periphery of the European Union. So the rewards that the European Union provides to these states, to my country for instance, they cope with the realities in the ground, with the reforms that have to be made. Otherwise, we will remain far distant from the level of, from the quality of life in the European states, for instance. I don't now if your statement about the strongest who use the soft power as an instrument in their interest is correct, it provides benefits to all the sides, the soft power. It is a persuasion, it is charm, but it is also a kind of guidance, stewardship towards the desired goals. And I have mentioned in my presentation that every country that is exposed to the influence of soft power makes a kind of rational calculus. Is it okay if some of the reforms will be implemented today and not tomorrow? Sequencing of the reforms is an authority, it is the competence of the national authorities. But the reforms represent a must. If the European Union, for instance, invests resources and guide the line to the countries which are interested in joining the common market of the European Union, this will provide benefits to the European Union and to the countries concerned, like Moldova, Ukraine, and the West Balkan countries of the region. I hope I have responded.
My point is basically that I agree with this saying that both benefits from the result.
Yes.
But the process, when it starts, it tends to be something that comes from above,
From top.
from down. But the benefit is shared.
You are right.
That's what I think.
Yes. The soft power is and the integration process, the adaptation to the institutional framework of the European Union is a top-down process. It cannot be seen otherwise.
That's my point.
But the benefits are larger. They are not driven, or they are not oriented to the elites. They are oriented to the elites as well, but they are oriented to the populations, which need the countries to perform better in trade, in exports, but also in the educational sphere, in the social sphere. It's a social charter, for instance, that is one of the most important elements of the constellation of the European institutions and bodies. Okay.
Final question here.
Hi, Ambassador. My name is Wen Chen, and I'm from Center on Public Diplomacy from University of Southern California in LA. I absolutely agree with you that soft power actually creates a zero-sum game for both countries. Whoever is applying that power to each other or using that power. And actually, Joseph Nye also mentioned about this in his book, Future of Power. But my question to you is that there's some discrepancy between your ideas that you just talked about and what you presented in your presentation. One thing you mentioned that soft power also means the integration of minority groups in your country and in EU. So that sounds a little bit like, to me, is more like a cultural proliferation to minority groups. So can you please give us some examples of how soft power is being applied in your country, and some examples of what are the cultural exchange programs that you have had with other countries, with EU members, and with the United States, talking from someone from your perspective?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Well, every definition has to be placed in the right context. What I meant by exercising and spreading the soft power in the national context is that, for instance, pure, traditional, conventional educational policies sometimes do not work. In Moldova, for instance, one thin, limited territory is legally a part of the Republic of Moldova. In fact, it is detached from it by a separatist administration. We use soft power in order to address the population of this region, to see Moldova as an interesting country to live. Okay. And the several policies that are promoted by the central government, for instance, do not apply exactly to this region because it is out of control of the central authorities. We can, just to be more, let's say, to provide you more documents and more information, Moldova has a population of 4.1 million of inhabitants, Transnistria, which is part of the constitutional space of Moldova, has 500,000, but it is out of the control of the Moldovan authorities. In order to reach them, we have to embrace, charm, integrate, create necessary benefits for the business communities in order for them to see Moldova as an interesting avenue for their future, to plan their lives, to create a kind of positive drive towards Moldova. Therefore, we use soft power that is exercised from the European Union in order to attract this region. Okay. Of course, there are plenty of other options in order to make the population more interested in European dream, in Kratima. That means exchanges of youth, for instance, youth exchanges, participation in several university programs, creation of specific research facilities for young researchers from physics, from mathematics, from engineering, to participate into the European bodies. And this creates the necessary combustion for seeing Europe as very interesting. There is one supposition that the population see largely the economical benefits of integration. Elites see more the political benefits of it. Nevertheless, all these elements, both basic, let's say, related to the 10 needs, the Maslow needs that we have to consider, and the long-standing objectives for the European integration are very necessary. The societies make rational decisions. They are not irrational. And therefore, let's say, being specific in your question, what kind of exchanges or investments into the educational sector we do with the United States, we have a large program of fellowships, internships, provided with the United States resources. We have relatively large diaspora. I cannot compare with other countries like the Polish diaspora in the United States, but we have in the United States about 60,000 of Moldovans living here. They moved after the disintegration of the Soviet Union, and they are becoming the champions of their country. Thank you.
All right, well, on this occasion, I'd like to ask everyone to please join in expressing our sincere gratitude to His Excellency Ambassador Munteanu. Thank you.